Well, you may have noticed that we are not in the book of Zechariah tonight. There's a reason for that. The reason is that I had a full day of work today. We went out to dinner this evening. We had our 2-year-old grandson with us for the last 24 hours, and I have had no time to really focus on Zechariah. Now, that doesn't mean we are without a message tonight. In fact, when I was at work today, there was a young man sitting in the break area reading his Bible. And it gave me a chance to go over and just engage with him and share some things with him. And he was going through the Gospel of Luke. He read through the Bible and he wanted to go back and go through the Gospels again. So he's in the Gospel of Luke. And I said, do you understand the difference between Matthew, Mark, and Luke and John? And he kind of knew the difference, but wasn't completely clear on that. So I had the opportunity to share that with him and teach him something along the way. A nice little perk of being at work there. Somebody searching for the truth, and God walks a preacher right up to their table that can share the truth with them. So that was really awesome to do. But I thought, well, what a great opportunity for me to share this with you tonight, because we're not going to be in Zechariah. I'm just not ready to talk about that seventh vision. I know the seventh vision, but there's some stuff we want to dig out of there that I haven't really researched thoroughly. So let's take a look at the 4 Gospels, and let's ask ourselves this: why do we have 4 Gospels? And why are they so different from one another? And the truth is, they're not all that different. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are strikingly similar, and we call them the synoptic Gospels because they look the same. You see the word optics in there. Syn, S-Y-N, is a prefix that means together or with each other. They look together. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are really telling pretty much the same stories, but they differ in some elements of their storytelling, and we're going to talk about that. And then, of course, John is completely different. John has a whole different purpose in mind and a whole different audience. So let's talk about this. Who were the audiences? And what's the purpose behind each of the Gospels? Because the purpose of the Gospels is to tell us about Jesus. But it's not just a biography. If it was a biography, they wouldn't be the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They would be the biographies of Jesus written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. A gospel is a specific type of genre that didn't really exist before the Gospels were written. The Gospels are, they're not just telling a history or a biography or the stories or the teachings of Jesus. They're telling about God's plan of redemption through Jesus Christ. And they're trying to get the good news across in a way that deals accurately and adequately with all those other areas. So it's like 4 artists painting the same subject, but from a different place. Like, for instance, you can stand at Mount Rushmore, and somebody can stand over there and say, man, you can hardly see Teddy Roosevelt's face, but somebody can stand over there, and that's all they see. When you stand in different positions, you see different things. We find that some of the elements of the stories differ from one to the other, but they're not contradictory. They're each person telling what they saw. If one person saw 2 angels at the tomb and the other person only saw 1, that's what they're going to report. It doesn't mean that the number changed. It's what they saw at the time. So, or maybe one of the angels left when the other person came. So you never know what it is that's leading to those differences. So let's just take a look at the 4 Gospels to start with, and look at their purposes and their audiences. Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, was written to the Jewish people in Jerusalem. That was his audience. And so in Matthew, you're going to see a lot of Old Testament citations, a lot of stuff about the law and traditions. Matthew starts with the genealogy, and that's important to the Jews, and he's the only one that tells the story of the Magi, because Matthew is trying to tell the people that Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah and King. He's the one that has the kings coming to worship the King of all creation. He has the Magi come from the far lands to come together and worship Jesus. He's trying to tell that story, so he's going to add the Magi in with his story. So he wrote that many times you'll see this took place to fulfill what was said by the ancients, or by the Old Testament. He didn't use the word Old Testament. There was only one Bible at the time, but it quotes the scriptures to support what he's talking about. And he begins with the genealogy to trace Jesus all the way back to Abraham and King David. And he has long sections of the teachings of Jesus. That's where we find the Sermon on the Mount. That's where we find the Olivet Discourse. Matthew likes these long, drawn-out teachings of Jesus because that's what he's trying to tell us about. And his theme is the kingdom of heaven. One of the unique things you'll find in Matthew's gospel is he never uses the word God in that context. While the other gospel writers say the kingdom of God, Matthew, being a proper Jew, would not pronounce the name of God, so he substitutes the word heaven, the kingdom of heaven, to avoid pronouncing the holy name of God. So we see that kind of difference. But his message to the world is, your king has come. And he's writing to the Jews, your king has come. That's the purpose behind his writing. Now, we take a look at Mark. Mark was writing to Romans. Romans have a specific way of looking at things. The Romans, they admired strength, they admired discipline, authority, and action. They weren't about words. The Jews, they loved the long, drawn-out teachings. You find none of that in Mark. Mark is just action-oriented, and they did this, then immediately they went and did this, then immediately they went and did this. That's kind of a repeating phrase throughout the Gospel of Mark. It's action, and let's move, let's go, let's just tell the stories and move on to the next one. So he's writing to Roman believers and the Gentiles, and he portrays Jesus as the servant. That's the key of Mark's gospel. While Matthew is trying to portray Jesus as the king, Mark wants you to realize that he came to serve, to be the servant that Isaiah talked about. He reminds us that the greatness of Jesus was found in his humility and his service to mankind. The king came to serve before he came to reign. That's what he is trying to tell us. So that's the book of Matthew, or Mark, sorry about that. It's also important to notice that while Matthew wrote his own gospel, Mark was really writing Peter's gospel. The early church fathers, the first pastors of the church as the church began to grow, told us that Mark and Peter sat down and cooperated and wrote that gospel. So Peter is the source of the gospel. Mark was the writer of it. So that's important to know. Now, Luke was writing to Greeks. So Matthew's writing to Jews. Mark is writing to Roman believers. And Luke is writing to Greeks. Greeks had a whole different mindset. The Greeks, they loved wisdom, they loved beauty and compassion, and the Greek pursuit was in the ideal human life. The philosophers of Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, Philo, and many of those who went before, their goal through philosophy was to create the ideal life for mankind. So It was the superb achievement of humanity is what they were after. So guess how Luke presents Jesus as the perfect ultimate achievement of humanity. Jesus was the perfect man, the God-man. This is what Luke is trying to get across to the Greeks. Interestingly, Luke includes many of the details the other writers don't. It's Luke that encompasses Jesus's relationship with women, that women were supporters of his ministry and held an important place in his ministry. It's Luke that talks about the children. He talks about the tax collectors. The tax collectors were Greek, right? They were Greek and Roman citizens living in Israel, and so Matthew is talking about the tax collectors. He talks about the Samaritans. That was important to the Greeks because the Greeks were cosmopolitan. They recognized the authority and sovereignty of each individual state within the Roman Empire, and the Jews were not interested in that. They were the chosen people. So Luke talks about the Samaritans. That's why you see the parables that aren't found elsewhere, the parable of the Good Samaritan, the parable of the prodigal son. So he's trying to trace Jesus's genealogy all the way back to Adam. Matthew goes back to Abraham because the covenant is important to him. Luke goes all the way back to Adam because he wants the Greeks and the Romans to know that this is about them too. So that's an interesting correlation there. So he is trying to tell that Jesus came for the whole human race, not just for the nation of Israel. And it shows us that nobody is beyond God's reach, including the Samaritan and the prodigal son. Now, John, his audience was the entire believing community, and indeed the non-believing community, the entire world, if you will. John wrote significantly later than the others. John was aware of Matthew, Mark, and Luke and what they had written, and John wrote because there was so much that was not included in their Gospels, and he wanted you to know about them. So many of the stories in the Gospel of John you don't find in the other Gospels because he's supplementing them. He's not just rehashing them, a fourth Gospel with the same stuff, although they do cover the important things, the baptism of Jesus, the Last Supper, the crucifixion, the resurrection, but in between, John is going to take a Greek philosopher look at Jesus. He's going to talk about light and darkness and good and evil and the cosmos and the chaos, the logos and chaos, those type of things. So you'll see a lot of that in the Gospel of John. And he tells us why he wrote. He tells us at the end, he says, these things I've written that you may believe. Because people knew of Jesus in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but John wanted to seal the deal and say, but this is why. Because in John chapter 3, you need to be born again. Jesus needs to reside in here. That was missing from the other three Gospels. So he focuses less on chronology and more on theology. You'll see some of the stories he tells they seem out of place. Jesus overturning the tables in the temple occurs in chapter 4 in John. Well, in the other Gospels, it's later, after Palm Sunday and the triumphal entry and right before the crucifixion. Maybe he did that twice, but John's not interested in chronology. He's building an argument to show who Jesus is. And Jesus is the Son of God. That's the important thing to John, that Jesus is the Son of God. So the four of them put together a unified picture that tells us this, that Israel has received their promised king, that Jesus was God's perfect servant, that he was the Savior of all humanity, and he was the eternal Son of God who brings eternal life. So the four of them together tell that complete picture. Now, what I want to share with you is what I shared with this young man today. And I think I've shared this with you before in the past, but I kind of wanted to bring it home and share it with you today. The way to look at those first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, in a way that expresses their unique purposes and audiences, is to take a look at how they tell one story in particular. And that story is the calling of Matthew. Remember, Matthew was the tax collector, and he was sitting in his tax booth, and Jesus came up and said, "Come and follow me." And he did. He left everything and followed Jesus. But the way those three Gospels tell that story tells you all you need to know about those three Gospel writers, because they're going to tell the story differently, all three of them. But they're not going to contradict. They're going to tell the story for the audience that they're writing to. Now, Luke tells the story of Matthew in Luke chapter 5, verses 27 to 32. Luke writes, "After that he went out and noticed a tax collector named Levi sitting in the tax booth. And he said to him, 'Follow me.' And he left everything and he got up and began to follow him." Now, that's all I want to read there, but I want you to notice something. How does he refer to Matthew, other than the fact that he uses his name Levi? He calls him the tax collector. Now that's important because he's writing to Greeks, and the Greeks want to know what made this man important. What was his occupation? Why was Jesus so interested in him? That was important to the Greeks. What is his occupation? What did this man do day in and day out? So Luke says Matthew was the tax collector. That's how he identifies him. That's what's important to Luke. And Luke is telling you what he thinks is important in the story of the calling of Matthew there. Now, Mark, on the other hand, in chapter 2, verse 17, we read, verses 13 to 17, Jesus went out again by the seashore, and all the people were coming to him, and he was teaching them. And as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting in the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. How does Mark refer to Matthew? What would be the important thing for Mark's audience? His heritage, his lineage. Who was his father? What tribe is he from? What is his genealogical history? This is what's important to the writers that Mark is talking to. So Levi, the important thing is that he was a tax collector, because he wants to show that Jesus he came and reached into the hearts of the social outcasts. Mark is telling the story, and he's giving the standing of Jesus, or of Matthew. He was the son of Alphaeus, so we know something about his background and his genealogy. That was important to Mark. Now, here's the really fun part. How does Matthew tell that story? What was important to Matthew about the calling of Matthew? To Mark, it was the fact that Jesus reached into all tribes and all people, and he called out the son of Alphaeus. To Luke, it was that Jesus didn't care about your social standing and your status. He called Matthew, or Levi, out of that. Listen to what Matthew says. See if you can pick up on this. This is in Matthew chapter 9, beginning in verse 9. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting in a tax collector's booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. Did you catch that? Yeah, he mentions that he's a tax collector, but the tax collector was the lowest rung in society. It was the lowest. They're below Gentiles, below drunkards, below prostitutes. The tax collector was a betrayer of Israel. The tax collector was compromising with Rome against his own people. He was going out taking the money out of the pockets of his fellow Israelites, the fellow Jews, and taking that and giving it to Rome. There's nobody lower than that. Nobody respected Matthew. Nobody loved him. Everybody hated him. But listen to how he refers to Jesus coming to him. He says he saw a man. He saw the man, Matthew. Jesus didn't see a tax collector. He didn't see a tribal connection. He didn't see a genealogical history. He didn't see anything except the man, Matthew. What a beautiful way to illustrate the difference between the Gospels. They're each trying to show you something. Luke wants you to know that Jesus reached into every social standing. Mark wants you to know that Jesus wasn't dividing up tribes and backgrounds and traditions. And Matthew wants to know that he sees the person. It's not the occupation, not the genealogy. He sees the person. The King of the world saw me, the man, Matthew. In the story of the Gospel of Matthew is how Jesus reached down and picked him up off the scrap heap, dusted him off, and made something out of him. That's why Matthew wrote. So I just wanted to share that with you. I love that story. It's not original to me. I heard that last year in my training sessions for Corporate Chaplains of America, and I just love that. So, all right, everybody, that's it for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night with an open mic night. If you got a question or something that you want to bring up, make sure you let us know about that, and we will be back and take a look at that. And to those of you who I missed, Kathy Horning, Michelle, and I saw Eddie Cobb is here, and I'm sure I missed some others. I did see a name there. It was, who was that? Sandy Johnson. Good to see you, Sandy. Welcome. So, all right, everybody, that's it for tonight. God bless each and every one of you, and we will see you next time on Digging Deeper Daily. God bless.